Without further ado, because I'm aware that time is short, so therefore so should my opening spiel be, we have with us this evening our chair, Sir Michael Barber, our president, Sir Peter Wanless, and of course our CEO, Gordon Hollins. I'd like to start proceedings by opening up the floor to Sir Michael Barber. Sir Michael, thank you very much indeed for joining us. How are you finding the position so far?
Well, I've loved every minute of it, even the difficult moments. So it's a privilege and honour, and very humbling. And I'm learning a lot. I've been amazingly welcomed, as I've said many times on these calls, by everybody associated with Somerset, the players, the supporters, the members. So there are lots of challenges, of course, in cricket, but I love a challenge, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's a great mission and a wonderful organisation. I thought I'd just mention two areas that I've been giving thought to, Spencer, before opening up to Q&A. The first is the ECB asked me to join and indeed represent them in Pakistan for the test matches in December. So I spent 2 weeks there for the before and during the whole of the Rawalpindi test, the first one, and then before and nearly all of the Multan test. I couldn't stay for the Karachi one. But I spent 2 weeks in Pakistan. I have other work to do with the government that I was doing in between the test matches. But this was, I think they invited me because I've been to Pakistan 50-something times. I've known successive prime ministers going back to 2008. I've been 50-something times. And the ECB, are very keen to rebuild the relationship with Pakistan cricket after what happened with the cancellation of the tour a year or so ago. And on that front, the whole thing was good. The ECB was excellent. The relationship with the PCB was excellent. I played a small part in it and was very privileged to be part of that. But what I wanted to say about the Pakistan visit were two things. One is, I could hardly move without running into somebody associated with Somerset cricket. It was wonderful in that sense. So I met Baba Azam, who was with us. I met Azhar Ali, who was with us. I met Imam ul Haq, who was with us. Obviously, I met Jack Leach, who, by the way, is in test matches the top wicket taker in the world in the last 12 months. I met Marcus Trescothick, batting coach and total hero. I met Vic Marks in the commentary box. I met Richard Gould, who's the incoming chair of the, chief executive of the ECB. So it was actually wonderful and heartening to see global Somerset, as it were. There was Somerset very well represented. The second thing is, and those of you that watched any of the games will have be onto this already, is what was happening in Rawalpindi and Multan was what the PCB people were saying to me. Is they said, your team is reinventing Test cricket. It wasn't just the pace at which they were scoring runs, it was the way Ben Stokes was moving the fielders around, etc., etc. It was very, very innovative and exciting. And there's been a January tour by New Zealand of Pakistan, and they dominated both games against Pakistan, but they couldn't finish either of them because they scored at 3.5 runs and over, and we were scoring at 6+ runs and over, thus giving us more time to take 20 wickets on flat pitches. But that reinvention of Test cricket, I've been thinking about it, and there are implications. First of all, I think in my head, I've been debating this balance and this tension between white ball and red ball cricket. So how do you get the right balance? But what this team was doing, our team was doing in Pakistan, was saying, actually, we're not going to balance these things. We're going to combine them. You look at the way Ben Duckett opened the batting, did really well, but he's basically playing like a white ball cricketer. So that's interesting, and we'll see where that leads with an Ashes tour ahead. But it also made me think about us. What's going to happen to county cricket? What does it mean for the 4 of our players that we're delighted to see in the England Lions? Tom Abel, obviously Tom Lammonby, James Rue, Tom Banton. What does it mean for them about how they think about pursuing their careers? And what does it mean for the wonderful Will Smead, who said he doesn't want to play red ball cricket anymore? But why would you want to rethink that if red ball cricket's becoming more like white ball cricket? I don't know. So there are lots of implications for us, how we play the county game in the county championship, how we think about that, how we prepare for the county championship. But it was fascinating. And the other thing I just want to mention, and I'll stop, is the new leadership of the ECB really is providing leadership, and it's a great relief. So whether or not we agree with everything they do, there's a direction, there's a sense of mission. Richard Thompson has said his mission is to make cricket, apart from being very exciting, which he doesn't have to do much about while the England team's playing like that, but also he wants to make it the most inclusive sport in the country. And we can help him with that. And I think it's a great mission. And Richard Gould will start on the 1st of February, knows Somerset well, obviously, given his background. Gordon and I have been working hard at that relationship. It was helpful for me to be in Pakistan with them, but Gordon and I have also been talking to them outside of that visit. And I'm confident there will now be a much clearer direction for cricket in England, which we've been sorely lacking for the last 18 months. And we have a relationship on which we can build. Of course, there'll still be things to argue over, to advocate, to lobby for, and we will be doing that. But we're in a good place, having some leadership, and Gordon and I have the good start of a good relationship with them. So, Spencer, back to you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think some of them have come in on this whole white ball and red ball thing, whatever. And I don't know the answers, actually, but I think it's a really good conversation for us to have at this stage.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your initial thoughts, Michael. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, everyone who's joined, please don't be shy. Please do feel free to use the chat function. We will try and get to your questions if we can. We have had quite a few already. And let's start with a topic that you've touched on already. Excuse me. Gentlemen, feel free to fight amongst yourselves to see who answers this. We've had a couple of questions on something that you've mentioned there, so Michael, about the impact of the so-called bazball, the way that England are playing red ball cricket in a white ball style. What impact do we think that this so-called bazball will have on the county game and therefore on Somerset County Cricket Club?
May I take that, Michael?
I would love you to. I just want to say, just give one bit of colour, because on the Pakistan introduced that wonderful new mystery spinner who got 7 wickets in the first innings he bowled in, and I happened to run into Baz himself that evening and said, "He's a really good spinner, isn't he?" To which Baz replied, "We hit him at 6 and over for 120 runs," smiled and walked off.
Tremendous. I think Michael makes a really good point when he referenced Will Smead's decision, because colleagues on the call will know that in previous calls I've expressed concern about the number of new tournaments that are going on around the world which take players away from us. So, for instance, between now and the beginning of the season, we've got 8 players away playing in another competition somewhere around the world. And 2 or 3 months ago, I was really concerned about that, because I could see hard choices being made to follow the white ball option. And then what does that mean for us as a club? I think Michael's made a really, really good point about what is going through the minds of those 8 players now, in that they must be asking themselves, what's my best route to international cricket? And for some who thought 2 or 3 months ago it was white ball, actually are rethinking that. And maybe their easiest route to an England shirt is through Test cricket now, which is an extraordinary development, because I don't think any of us saw it coming.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. As I assume you imagine, we have had quite a lot of questions regarding the high performance review. Particularly Andy, for example, messaged in ahead of the meeting. Do we have any updates on the changes for the 2024 season? Obviously, people assuming that if we want to plan for 2024, we need to know what's happening in 2023 so that we can prepare for it. We've had other questions regarding, can we have an update with regards to the high performance review? Can we guarantee that Somerset representatives will not vote to further reduce the red ball county championship? So it's a topic that's very much on the minds of Somerset supporters, Somerset members and cricket supporters and members as a whole. Where exactly at the moment do we stand on the high performance review, and what are the next steps likely to be?
Well, the first thing to say is, we obviously all want a high-performing England team, and we've got one at the moment. But like with Clive Lloyd and Viv Richards in the West Indies, or Alan Border right through the next 15, 20 years, what would be great is to sustain it and not just have a passing brilliant team. And that does need some thought. So, and then coming to the specific point, the second thing is there are decisions still to be made, but don't underestimate how much we've already influenced where we've got to. You know, it's not so many months ago, people were talking about what we're going to do in 2023. That's resolved. I think I don't know exactly, none of us know exactly how the 2024 season will roll out, but the kind of worst case scenarios, I think, are increasingly worst case scenarios for those who like red ball cricket, I should emphasize, are looking less likely. There are decisions to make on the divisional structure for 2024. And I think that's more likely to be a 2-divisional structure than a 3-divisional structure, which was being much touted a few months ago. And so I think some of the fears that people had, we can not stop worrying about, but be confident that we've made progress since then. But the decision on the divisional structure, how you get points in the county championship games, there's still some significant decisions to be made that do need to be made before the start of this coming season. Gordon may have more to say on that, but I think we shouldn't underestimate how much we're already winning the argument.
Yeah, no, I echo that, Michael. And I think the only thing I would add is, while we basically worked very hard to stop the proposals around reduction in championship cricket in particular coming into effect in 2023, we worked really hard to influence that, as Michael inferred. The structure is still not satisfactory for us or the Southwest in particular. And I've repeatedly made the point that to have really only 4 Royal London games in Taunton with a team that's mainly second team, if not third team, for 43 days across the height of summer is unsatisfactory. And we are working very hard to come out with a good outcome for us and for the game, and particularly the Southwest in that respect. And I think in some ways this process, Michael, might be fair to say that there was a bit of a hiatus while they were waiting for Richard and Richard to get in, because there was some monumental decisions to be made that would have been wrong to make with an interim leadership. So that might have slowed it down a touch, but we've both got meaningful meetings in the next couple of weeks where this topic will be picked up.
Can you understand sort of members and supporters' frustrations with like you said, the amount of cricket at the height of summer, and go towards the end of the season, not knowing where you need to finish to potentially avoid relegation or stay in the top division? You wouldn't see that happening in football or rugby or something like that.
Look, I think that I mean, taking a point, Spencer, those decisions do need to be made before the cricket starts this season, so you know what your jeopardy is or what your opportunities are. And by the way, for us, we really need to be aiming to be in the top 5, because even if there are 2 divisions, you don't want to be down the bottom of a first division or anywhere near it, because. So we need to aim high,
win the thing, and we don't need to worry about relegation.
That would win the thing, and we've made history. But that would be fantastic. Yes.
We've had a question come in on the chat facility. Martin, thank you very much indeed. Again, about the high performance review. We're number 1 in the short form of cricket, so he assumes that the ECB and Andrew Strauss will change the plan and now focus on red ball. Does that mean that 2023 or 2024 before that happens? What do we think is next in line with regards to that?
Well, 2023 set, so we know what that looks like now. We've got the fixtures, we know where we are. What happens beyond that, let's see. I think it mentioned that we've got a couple of very meaningful meetings with ECB in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and more will become apparent then.
Staying with the high performance, sorry.
Yeah, and Andrew Strauss has basically stepped back from it, so it's now very much in the hands of the new ECB leadership. And Richard Thompson is very positive about red ball cricket, as I think Richard Gould is. So I think the whole situation moved on. It's an ECB set of agenda now, and they will want to set out a vision for cricket for some way to come, and they will want to move beyond the endless tinkering of the last few years if they possibly can, and they will therefore want to get a substantial momentum in terms of numbers and direction of the counties behind their agenda.
Okay. Staying with high performance review, had another question in as well, suggesting that, given the review and how that has taken place, is there any scope for counties to agree to a rule change that would remove the right of the ECB to unilaterally bring forward any proposals for changes in structure of the county game? Is that, is giving counties more power potentially the way forward? And does the fact that we've got Richard Gould, someone who knows about cricket and cricket in the Southwest in particular, now in the hot seat, if you like, is that something that could be of benefit to the club and the county game?
I think just on that, I think first thing to say is that for any structural change in the domestic structure, you need 12 out of 18 minimum to vote in favour. So the ECB actually have no power there at all. It's the 12 out of the 18 that determine change, and if you don't get 12, you have no change, which actually is what happened effectively in keeping 2023 as it has come out to be.
Okay. We've had a message from Paul Luckett. Please vow now not to vote for a reduction in red ball championship cricket. I mean, we've spoken at length about this in various other forums, haven't we, Gordon and Sir Peter and Sir Michael? The importance that we as a club place on red ball cricket, and in particular, obviously, that coveted county championship.
Yeah, I think, Michael, I'm happy to take this if you want me to, and please add. But I've said before that I think when you're going into a discussion where you have 1/18 of a say over what happens, to tie your hands to one single issue is a mistake. And you go wait and see what's on the table before you determine which way you go, because ultimately we can't decide this. We've got to work with others. And I've said before, if someone came to us and said, look, we'll reduce the number of championship matches to 6, but by the way, they'll all be in the middle of summer and they'll all have all your England players available, I think there's a discussion with our membership that we'd like to have, because I think those views would be split. So I don't think it's sensible, is my own personal view, to tie our hands on a conversation before we see any specific proposal.
But it's important, isn't it, that our members know that championship cricket is very high up in our thinking.
It's our top priority, and but we have to combine it with the other formats. And my point about Pakistan and seeing new combinations of white and red ball in the way the game is played is really important in this. So we will continue to be strong advocates of high quality red ball cricket with the best players available. But to tie it just purely to a specific number of days, I don't think is sensible. But I do think we have already made progress on the argument from some of the worst case scenarios that people were fearing back in August and September. And that I don't think they will come back.
Okay. Which I imagine that high performance review will come up a little bit later on as well. But we've had a question from Mike regarding women's cricket at county level. Is it in terminal decline? Obviously, at the moment, the Somerset women play an inter-county T20 tournament with the majority of the summer given over to the Charlotte Edwards Cup and the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy. Obviously, the regional system now does obviously take not precedent, but is at the forefront of the promotion of the women's game and has had a huge impact on how fast the women's game is growing. And it's great for the women's game that we've seen 2 Western Storm players included in the inaugural Women's Under-19 World Cup, which gets underway a little bit later on this week. Having spoken to both those players and the people regarding Western Storm, although it would appear that the women's game at county level is being slightly marginalised, is it that the case that it's being done so for the greater good of the women's game with regards to the regional setup with Western Storm and things like that?
This is reasonably complicated in that women's cricket in this country, if you look at women's county cricket, there are some counties that play women's cricket where a woman is playing her very first game of cricket playing for their county. Quite literally, you have some counties in that situation where it's the entry level to women's cricket. And then you've got others who are much stronger, and it becomes performance cricket. And that is why the game, not just the ECB, but the game decided that to have 8 regions where the quality of cricket between the 8, and we're lucky enough to have Western Storm, but where the quality of cricket and the competition was good enough to improve standards, rather than have one county getting 350, or probably 550 these days, but one getting a big score and then the other being all out 20, which was literally what was happening previously. And that's why regions came about. But what we are committed to doing is working with Somerset women. That is continuing to make sure they have opposition which provide competitive cricket and is an entry to our better players progressing into the Western Storm.
And some of the members on the chat on this session will have seen that Sophie Luff is doing brilliantly, playing for Parramatta in Australia, are really enjoying being a full-time professional and making the most of it. So the fear that women's cricket, maybe some counties will struggle, but women's cricket itself is on the up. And in a separate role I have with the FA, we've got a session coming up on women's coaching and developing that. Though you can see women's football taking off. I think women's cricket will go to new heights in the next few years, but getting the structures right is really important. And people like Sophie Luff will be at the forefront of that. Absolutely.
And the fact that it is now a viable career path for women and girls in the region to become professional cricketers is fantastic. And obviously Western Storm and the 8 regions need to take a great deal of credit for that. Moving on, we've had a question on the chat from Harry. In the context of winning the championship, our bowling resources look stretched, especially if Lewis Gregory is out of action. What are our thoughts? Also having regard to Craig Overton potentially being out of contract at the end of the season. Is one of you gonna put your whites on and help us open the bowling? Is that what's going to happen?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a question to Andy Hurry, really, because there's a whole set of conversations going on about players that I don't think it's the job of the chairman to comment on. But I do know that Andy is a great person and working very hard at it. But you're right. Craig Overton is our star bowler in wicket taking terms. If you look at the games we won in the championship, he was pretty much crucial to that. So it's I know it's an issue very much on Andy's mind. Gordon, you may be able to add.
Yeah, no, I think Harry makes a really good point, because I think it's obvious that we are stretched in that area. We're fortunate in having a couple of 2 or 3 really talented young bowlers, Sonny Baker and Casey Aldridge and Ned Leonard. We've got some real talent in terms of what's coming through. Correct, Craig being out of contract, but as always, discussions continue there, and we're very optimistic about that outcome. But our recruitment's not finished. I would say that to Harry, and we're very conscious of where the strengths and limitations of the squad are, and we'll be doing all we can to reinforce in those areas.
I'd just add, this is not about bowling, but you'll be pleased to see we've just recruited a very, very impressive batting coach, South African, who's been working in Gordon's home country for Cricket Scotland in the past, and comes very well recommended and with a lot of enthusiasm. So I think that's going to be great.
Yeah. I just say on that point, I had 4 text messages last night, couple from Scotland, couple from South Africa. I got one from Steve Elworthy, CEO at Surrey, who knows Shane really well, and all 4 said to me, "Look, you've done so well to secure that guy. He's a really good person, as well as being a highly talented coach." And so I'm really, really optimistic about Shane's contribution.
And we touched on recruitment there. We've got to be pretty happy with the incoming so far in Tom Kohler-Cadmore and Sean Dixon. I think members are going to be looking forward to seeing them in action. Which brings us to another question before we come on to Sir Peter and his Hearts and Minds survey. Obviously, this is one that everybody wants to know, and every day I wait for Andy Hurry to come down the stairs, come to my area of the office and go, "Spencer, I've got something for you." When can we expect an announcement regarding overseas players for the new season?
Well, I've always said, when someone says we should have an overseas, what's your overseas plan? I said, well, our job is to get the right overseas, not just an overseas. And I think that Andy's done a brilliant job in recent years in getting really good overseas players who just don't come and play cricket and compete on the field. They do really well in terms of leaving a legacy with younger players. I can't tell you how beneficial it was to have Peter Siddle working with Sonny Baker and Casey Aldridge last year. And we're keen to get the right ones rather than just jump in early. And sometimes you have to wait, but don't worry, there's a lot of work going on that front.
Can I just say one more thing on the, while we're on overseas players? In the opportunity I had to talk to Imam and Baba Azam in Pakistan, you don't underestimate the very, very positive impression that we Somerset, nothing to do with me, we Somerset make on players like that. They really loved that. Even though in Imam's case it was only the space of September, they get a great affection, and it's because of the nature of the ground, because of the way Andy runs the squad, because of the nature of the club, and because the fans are so enthusiastic and interested in red ball cricket. So we've got a lot of advocates out there on this front.
We'll come back to some more questions shortly. We've still got some pre-sent ones, and they're coming in live. But it's at this juncture we'd like to officially welcome our president, Sir Peter Wanless, to the floor/screen, if you will, because those of you who have been following what's been happening at the club will have seen this vitally important piece of work that's been carried out and been, I guess, at the helm of that has been Sir Peter, with regards to the Hearts and Minds survey, and really finding what is at the heart and minds of Somerset's most important asset, which is that of our members and supporters. So if we can give you the floor/screen, Sir Peter, thank you for joining us tonight, and for your work on the survey. How impressed have you been by the responses so far, and of course, what are the next steps likely to be?
Thanks, Spencer, and good evening, everyone. The role of president is an odd and interesting one. If you look in the club handbook, you have all this kind of apparent influence and responsibility, but actually no power. So there's a kind of roving ability to attend all sorts of meetings across the club and represent the club in a way that my counterpart at Middlesex, Mike Selvey, describes as the role of the ceremonial goat. But you're also invited to offer counsel and consultancy to the chair and chief executive in kind of unspecified ways on a pretty much ongoing basis. So that's an extraordinary privilege and opportunity. And when I started this role, I did think, well, how can a president do that in a really convincing and evidence-based way? And it seemed to me like an important first step would be to get the strongest sense we could as a club as to how our members and supporters thought and felt about our club. What is it that makes us special? What is it that makes us keep coming back to the county ground, or tuning into the live stream, or pitching up on a Tuesday evening in our numbers to have these sorts of conversations? And I have a personal opinion and an insight on that based on 40 plus years of supporting Somerset, but so do many of you. So the intention of the survey was to invite as many members and supporters as possible to share your thoughts and insights about the essence of what makes the club special, because we can be absolutely sure that Somerset as a club is not going to look exactly the same in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years time, and there's going to be a whole lot of contextual change going on around us, and those people who do have the power and authority in determining what our club do will have to take all sorts of decisions, big and small. My experience of running organizations and thinking about the culture of organizations has been that it's strong organizations really understand and respect their past and what has made them great, whilst recognising that the future cannot be wholly defined by what has made an organisation great in the past. But my hope and expectation was, if we could run a really rich and engaging survey, we would determine together a really strong sense of what the essence of Somerset Cricket Club was that made us feel it was great, and we could then enable the executive and the decision makers at Somerset as we move forwards to have regard to the essence of the club in all the decisions that they take, big or small. That doesn't mean that we as members and supporters can have a kind of veto over everything, because some things are out of our control and there are bigger considerations. But I think it's a huge mistake to ignore the factors and the insights and the understanding and the experience that has led an organisation, in our case Somerset, to be where it is today. And frankly, I think one of the things that has been so depressing and difficult and challenging about the whole 100 experience has been, there's been survey after survey after survey, but I don't think any of us were ever invited to offer our comments and thoughts. And when we did, it was almost like, well, we don't want to know what you think because you are already engaged in cricket. That seems to ignore a really vitally important audience and set of stakeholders in the game. So I think what we have done is I don't think any of the other counties are doing anything quite the same. So that is interesting, and it's been quite an extensive exercise. So the survey closed within the last week, and we've had over 700 responses. 62% of those were from members, and 38% were from non-members. Now here's the strength and the limiting factor of the survey, and it speaks to a question which Rob has put in the chat about future generations of supporters. But of those 715 people who responded to the survey, nearly 400 of them have been associated with Somerset for over 30 years. So we're great at loyalty and securing loyalty and support, and so that's just something to bear in mind. 60% of the people who completed the survey had played the game at some point. Over 80% of the 715 who responded attend cricket matches on a reasonably regular basis. We did offer an option for people to say they had fallen out of love with cricket. Only 9 out of 715 felt like that. There's a great positivity to the game, and we have tapped into a really active set of members and supporters who are regularly attending Somerset matches, which I think is really interesting. Of those who answered, over 40% live within 20 miles of Taunton, but nearly 20% are like me and live more than 100 miles away from the ground, but still have this strong sense of kind of connection and engagement with the club. There's a lot of, that's the sort of quantitative stuff, the numbers of people who filled in the survey. Beyond that, there's a ton of really fascinating qualitative information, words, adjectives, descriptors, which you have used to describe the things which you think are most important to the club, the things which you think make Somerset special. And we need to look at all of that in quite some detail. So I can't really go into that now, but I think that all needs analysing and assessing over the next few weeks, discussing with the board, and then we should come back and give a full presentation to all of you and everyone who's interested in what it is that we have discovered. But just to give you one headline indicator which leapt out for me, there was a question where we ended up giving, I think, 11 different characteristics of what do you think is the most important thing about Somerset Cricket Club, and I think we asked you to pick 3 from memory. The most popular of all those 11 was excellent competitive cricket. That was kind of head and shoulders above everything else. But there were 3 others which attracted significant support, and I think the club has to have really careful regard to, as well as being competitive on the pitch. And those were, we said, developing and celebrating young talent was really important and a feature of the club. An exceptional match day experience was something that mattered to lots of us. And to be a leading force in promoting cricket in the West Country was a really important factor as well. So as we develop the kind of strategic position of the club and go into those conversations with the ECB and others, it would be awkward, to say the least, if the club wasn't having regard to those 4 particular factors which I've described, none of which are great surprises necessarily, but they scored significantly higher than a number of the other factors that we were looking at. So I won't say much more at this stage, but I hope that gives you just a bit of a kind of flavour of what it was I was hoping we could achieve through this exercise. It gives you a strong sense that none of what has been received will be wasted, because we can draw out, I think, some really powerful word clouds, a sense of what it means to be Somerset County Cricket Club, to be able to play back to you and play into the board discussions and everything else, and then give a full report back before we get into, I imagine, before we get into the cricket season this year.
Okay, I mean, obviously we are a unique club, aren't we? And this is going to help us remain that way.
Well, I don't think there's any other club that has shown such a deep and sophisticated interest in what its members and supporters regard as important. Based on the conversations I've had, certainly with the other presidents, I think there will be individuals who could speculate as to what key factors and characteristics are that make the culture of their clubs important, but no one has sought to kind of codify it in quite this way. And if you know what you value, then you can actively consider it in the decisions that you take, can't you, as opposed to relying on the instincts of particular individuals.
Can I just mention something, Spencer? If it turns out when Peter's finished the analysis that those 4 points are the priorities of the 11 factors for members, that's going to give us that's going to add weight to Gordon and me when we're arguing with the ECB, because you've got all the things that we really are already onto, and that will give great strength to it when we can say we know our members think this because that's what they told us.
Of course, once again, thank you to everybody who filled that in, and of course, Peter, thank you very much indeed for your work surrounding that. I imagine we'll potentially get some questions on that as we get towards the end of our session. We've got about 20 minutes left.
Could I, Spencer, lead us into the question which Rob had earlier, just because that one was already there, and I sort of half explained the point. But I think one of the challenges or questions for us about this survey is that it's been filled in by a lot of extremely loyal long-term supporters of a certain age, and we know and feel and think together really strongly on some issues. But securing the future is a really important and relevant challenge to us. And one of the questions we asked in the survey was specifically about what are your ideas and insights for what would be valued by future generations. And I've not gone through and looked at all the detail of all of that, but there's some really interesting insights and suggestions within this work which we can start to build on. So there's one kind of practical example of how, when we get I think that is a really big strategic challenge for the club. Where are the next generations of supporters coming from? We've got not just our own kind of individual bright ideas, but a significant number of suggestions from people on the call and beyond.
So the answer to Rob's question essentially is watch this space.
And continue to think, I say continue to think about this issue, because one of the questions for me, one of the weaknesses, if you like, of this survey is we haven't got hundreds of 18 to 30-year-olds telling us why they think Somerset County Cricket Club is a hugely important factor in their lives. And I believe that we want and need future generations to be feeling that way. So we need to think carefully about that, as well as recognizing what it is that has led us to feel so strongly and positively about our club, and connect those two things together.
Absolutely. Thank you very much again. We've had a question from Steve regarding the H word. He works with young cricketers who are fans of the 100. If we were able to secure 100 franchise for the Southwest or Somerset, what benefits do you think it would bring the club? Will we, for example, be able to afford the cost of setting up, more temporary stands throughout the ground? Obviously, the 100 has had a mixed reaction in the region. Would that change potentially if there was a potential Southwest or Somerset-based franchise? What are our thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Michael, you all right if I take that initially?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah. Look, I think it is obviously the 100 has been very divisive. I don't think anyone would argue that around the game. And I think the core support, as I would call them, the traditional core supporter, has been alienated in cases. I think that's obvious. I think, however, the question that we'd like to answer as a board is, what does the school kid do in August to watch top flight men's cricket in the Southwest? So if you look at this year, it's you've got one international men's game of cricket in the Southwest at Bristol, which is against Ireland in a one-day game. Now, so my challenge to ECB and colleagues is, what do you do if you've got a school kid in this part of the world who loves cricket and wants to come and watch top flight men's cricket during the school holidays? And actually, when you put it like that, it becomes less emotive, it becomes more objective, and it's just a reality. That cannot go on. Whichever way you look at it, that cannot go on. And I think that's a very hard argument to battle with. So I think the question is, how do we get that top flight cricket in August? It's not acceptable to have 43 days without a real first 11 men's game in the peak of summer. And how do we tackle that problem? And obviously now we've got Richard G as opposed to Richard T coming in at the ECB. I've already had some conversations with Richard. Michael has had conversations with the other Richard, and that's just something that we're progressing behind the scenes and considering carefully what to do and how to address that problem that has to be resolved. The thing that goes with that, as someone picked up on the chat, which was really useful, is about the venue. We do not currently have a venue that is fit to stage top class cricket. And I reference particularly the Botham stand, which is nearing end of life, as I've said many times. That costs a few £1 million to resolve. So in any solution to August, if we want top flight cricket, we have got to come up with a solution for the venue, and looking at how we produce a venue that is fit to stage the top flight matches, albeit with a smaller ground than the majority, but a venue that provides the facilities to players, officials, spectators, members that they expect in this day and age. And that's a challenge that we as a board are wrestling with. We're doing some work on that, on what the options are, and exploring the art of the possible right now. And then obviously we'll feed back to members in due course. But all of that conversation is in the round. Is that fair to say, Michael?
It's true. Everything you say is exactly what we're thinking about, and we do have to. there's another point in the chat about the youngsters loved the 100, and from somebody who coaches youngsters, and should we be considering a Southwest or Somerset franchise? And I do think we should be considering these things, and obviously we'll have proper open consultation about any such thing at the right moments. But we do need to work out how to attract the next generation, as Peter just pointed out. We also need to address the August question that Gordon repeatedly raises with the ECB, in which they have clocked as a big problem. Somebody in Pakistan was talking to me about it in Gordon's absence. So it's really, the message got through. So those two things matter. And then I want to go back to my point again about thinking not just about the tension between red ball and white ball cricket, but how the things go together for the players. And I'm sure that, I mean, some of our players, I think 9 players were away in different 100 franchise teams this summer of our players. If there were a Southwest franchise, I think a lot of them would much prefer to be with it and with us. They came back, they hadn't all had a great time. So we also have to think about the player perspective on this. But these are big issues, and I'm very glad they're part of the debate.
One of the depressing things about the public discussion around how to engage young people, I think, has been this sort of young people are interested in the 100 and they're not allowed to be interested in other forms of cricket. And I think our survey is showing that lots of us believe that there are a number of fantastically exciting things about highly competitive T20, 50 over and red ball cricket, all of which can attract people to the ground. Yeah. They don't necessarily have to be designed and marketed with the kind of fireworks and the music and everything else that goes with the 100, and there's been a bit of a kind of take it or leave it discussion, which hasn't helped anyone. And I do really sense that everybody is moving on from that polarization now. Yeah. And if through exercises like this we can reconnect the sort of voices and the heart and the soul of the game with the future of what young generations can enjoy by way of competitive cricket in the Southwest, which is coming out as our #1 factor, then that would be a much better place to be.
Yeah, and listening to Ben Stokes, any of you who've heard him talk on various podcasts and news programs, he's saying we want to make Test cricket entertaining. That's what they want to win matches, and they are winning matches, but they want to make it entertaining because they can see that the alternative is the false dichotomy or the dichotomy that you just set out, Peter. So we will see what happens to the Test match game as well as to the various forms of the white ball game.
I'm conscious we've got 10 minutes left, so we're going to try and get through as many of the questions as we can. We have one in from Chris this week. What are Somerset doing to encourage families and children to attend matches or to become members of the club? Gordon, probably one for yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and such an important question, as Peter was alluding to earlier. And what we're doing this year for the first time is coming up with a family ticket for Blast. Get more details on that in due course, but for the first time we'll have a family ticket that makes it more cost effective for families to come to the ground, which is one thing. We also asked the ECB for a balance of weekend Blast fixtures and evening fixtures. So this year we have 3 on a Friday night, which will attract people who want a night out and have a good time, and then we've got 3 on a Sunday, which it makes it more accessible for families, and then we've got 1 on a Wednesday as well. So we've got that balance. So we've done those 2 things to help attract these people. And the other thing we've done in the last couple of years is to revamp our junior membership. So rather than just calling a junior, a 5-year-old thinks very differently from a 14-year-old, as we all know. And therefore, what we've done is we've tailored our membership packages for different age bands. I think we've got 4 different age groups now where people are going to apply, and then the communication and the packs that they receive are tailored to that particular age group. So I hope all those things will help.
We've had one from Andy Thorpe, all the way down in North Cornwall. With the hugely increasing transport costs, what can the club do to help members living over, say, 75 miles away is there the opportunity to offer some sort of discounted country membership for those who live over yonder?
Another one from me, it sounds of it. Well, the first thing I would say is we have an associate membership now, which is more cost effective, but it allows people 3 championship days and 2 Royal London days to come into the ground, and that's aimed at people who can't get to the ground as often as others who are closer to hand can do. So that's an important thing. But at the same time, I think I have to sort of get a bit of sense of reality as well. Our energy bill, folks, has gone up 400% in the last 18 months. So one of the most challenging things we have on our hand just now is to make sure that the club's finances are sustainable and allow us to invest in things that give us what the members want, which is excellent cricket, as Peter was alluding to earlier on. But you know, that is stark. So £125,000 of energy bills 18 months ago, north of 500,000 in 2023. And when you say that quickly, it's easy, but believe you, when I'm looking at the accounts and trying to manage the books, that's a scary number. So we have to do all we can to make cricket accessible for our membership and as cost effective as we can, and make sure that the matchday experience is as good as it possibly can be. And we've got work to do on that, we know. But at the same time, we've got to balance the books. So it's striking that balance.
Okay. Obviously, we always talk about, you know, the importance of the Somerset family and the family nature of the club. Mike has questioned the Daffabet partnership that we announced earlier this year. What can we say about that?
Hey, I'll take that.
Okay, yeah, you go first. Go on.
Hey, look, I understand the question. I think that what's key to say here is that betting company investment in sport is embedded in the funding model of sport and has been for many, many years. It's been there, and it's not kind of additional money. It's money that's required to run professional sports clubs. I think what we're doing as part of Peter's work is understanding what it is that our members feel strongly about. I know some people feel strongly about this topic. Others feel strongly about advertising products that have lots of sugar in it, and others think strongly about alcohol. And it's how we can come up with development of our strategy over the next few months, how we can come up with a model which balances the requirements of the club that we need to remain competitive, along with what we think is the right ethical policy for investment in our club. And that's something we'll be listening about in due course. But I wouldn't underestimate the impact of the commercial need. So it's balancing commercial need with ethical policy is very tricky for every sports club.
And just to add to that and reinforce it, the new board is still forming. We, as you know, we only came together shortly after the AGM last summer, but we're now really getting into our stride. And at a meeting in the near future, we will have a proper debate about the ethical basis for our sponsorship policy in general. But we don't think it's wise to unpick deals that are already done. I think that just gets you into all kinds of difficulty. But we will have a proper debate of the betting and gambling, but also the other ethical issues that are raised by sponsorship. And it's rarely black and white, and it's often complicated, but we do need a policy.
We have had a question from Martin, but I think it's probably more a foundation / pathway / Andy Hurry question about, obviously, white ball cricket taking care of itself. What's happening at school levels and minor counties levels with red ball cricket, and that's potentially one for another day. I think we've probably got time for one more. The family day at the Royal London Cup in 2022 was fantastic. My family, including children and grandchildren, had a great day. Will it be repeated this year? And obviously we Dan Cooper, who works in the office, did an awful lot in the planning of this, and when he told us that he was bringing an armadillo into the Cooper Associates County Ground, we all had reservations, but we've heard nothing other than positive things about the armadillo and its paddling pool. Obviously, I think, you know, we're looking once again to do that, but gentlemen, we've talked about future generations and inspiring people and people having a good time out, because as well as competing with Exeter Chiefs and Bristol City and Bristol Rugby, you know, we're competing with Butlins and the beach and the cinema and the bowling alley and everything as well, aren't we? So it is important, isn't it, that we do different things and carry out these activations on match days. And I guarantee you there won't have been many other first-class counties that had an armadillo in a paddling pool during the course of the summer of 2022. How important is it that we utilise our match days to bring people in for other reasons and potentially just the cricket?
100%. I'm delighted that Nigel got some value out of it. Fantastic, and something we'll certainly be looking to repeat this year.
I would just add, if we keep it going long enough, Nigel could come with his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
When I came to cricket as a boy in Glastonbury on a Sunday, I remember bowling on the outfield to Geoffrey Boycott behind a long line of young children, and that was enough for me. How times have changed.
Imagine how much he would have loved the game if Geoffrey Boycott had brought an armadillo with him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm conscious that we've only got a couple of minutes left. I'll leave it to people who are far more gravitas than us. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Gentlemen, have you got any messages for those who have joined us tonight? It will be available via our YouTube channel as a recording, so if you enjoyed it so much that you want to watch it again, or if you want to show members of your family the highlights package, this obviously will be available on our YouTube channel. The bit about the highlights package was a lie, though. So gentlemen, what have you got to say to those people who have joined us tonight?
One final thought for me, Spencer. It's the classic wet Tuesday in winter, isn't it? And that over 100 people turned up to spend an hour discussing Somerset cricket is both very heartening, and I found the discussion incredibly valuable, and I really appreciate people giving up their time.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your support. It's invaluable.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed, and also thank you to Ben Warren, who's been working hard behind the scenes, and I believe from that screenshot is still in the office, despite the fact that it's 8 o'clock at night. That's what happens. His electricity bill is so high that he just stays in the office.
Well, somebody has to feed the armadillo as well.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening, and of course to our members and supporters who have joined us tonight, thank you very much indeed. We hope to see you again either at the Cooper Associates County Ground for one of our 2 open days, which are coming up shortly, details of which are on the website, or if you're unable to make those, at our next members forum via this format. So once again, everybody, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening.